Good afternoon and welcome to this week's 2-minute warning feature interview. We're at a time where different societies are focusing their efforts on finding ways to accelerate decarbonization across different industries. Also, from a society perspective, there's more focus from different stakeholders on the efforts that different companies, different types of organizations are taking to address their commitments with sustainability and other social aspects. Here in the Middle East, we are expecting to have 2 back-to-back COP summits over the next 2 years. First, the COP27 in Egypt and the COP28 in the United Arab Emirates, the UAE. And over the last years, we've seen this growing interest on environmental, social, and governance aspects, ESG factors, and which we're going to be discussing with this week's featured guest for this interview. It's 2 minutes to midnight, and I have with me Habiba Al-Marashi, the founder and president of the Arabia CSR Network, and co-founder and chairperson of the Emirates Environmental Group, who's been advocating for environmental aspects in the UAE for over 30 years. So Habiba, let me start with the starting question. I'd like to ask you about the ESG aspects, but before that, we used to hear some years ago about corporate social responsibility, the CSR. That's another concept when it comes to sustainability. But it seems like that has sort of faded away. It's not that talked anymore. While ESG, you can pretty much find publications, all the media talking about it every day. What are your thoughts about this? What's the difference between one concept between CSR and ESG?
So when we started in the early, thank you very much for the question, by the way. When we started in the early 1990s, the main topic on the table was environmental conservation, environmental protection, and so on. And then in the beginning of the year 2000, 2002, when I attended the World Summit in South Africa, the terminologies of corporate social responsibility started being toyed by different multinationals and organizations. It became a very hot topic in the 2006, 7, and 8, and 9. And then, they became different, manifestation of that. And today, in the last 3 years, you see the ESG issue being a fundamental requirement to the success and sustainability of any organization. So like any other country, I believe, what I saw in UAE. So the focus is not environmental issues. We are looking at climate action, but there's more focus on looking at the policies, looking at the practices, looking at what are the required pillars that you need to put in place to ensure that the companies are built on strong foundations and that there is a good value added to their strategies. So they have seen the value. By the way, the environmental angle as well, when you look at the different entities in the Arab region, particularly in the UAE, it was amongst the good ones that we saw from the early entities. They realized that they have to look at their environment, health, and safety issues. So that was intact. Then the issue of governance started gaining prominence, more clarity amongst the players, particularly the private sector. The government jumped and became a very strong advocate for the protection of the labor rights, the blue-collar workers, and so on and so forth, and putting regulations requirement for the private sector to really rally together, ensure that we are doing what is right by the people, we are doing it right by the economy, as well as we are doing right by the environment. So you cannot say one is more important than the other. That the whole process was that we pushed them all together. And there were issues that were being put together, and we are looking at the drivers of ESG, whether we are looking at the direct, short-term or middle-term or long-term results that we are aiming to achieve. So many of the companies today are aware of the importance of these issues and looking at it as a material issues for their business, particularly when you are coming to the sustainability reports that are being issued out of the UAE and the region. So it become not an issue that they can avoid it, they can sideline it. It's very difficult to do that. They understand the importance of that, and I think this is where the change is happening. And the adoption of international standards, looking at the benchmarks that are out there. Quality was one of the first entrants towards this sustainability journey, and it started in the early 1990s. UAE was the place where everybody was pushing for quality. Today, it is a prerequisite. If you are talking about sustainability, having quality is a prerequisite, so that is a given that organization will have. And then there's this nice, beautiful appetite for going to have the different ISOs, where that deals with environmental safety, that deals with quality, that deals with environmental management systems, and the list goes on. And there are so many certification nowadays. Sometimes you find the entities, whether government, by the way, or private, listing the sheer number of certification that they have got and they continue to get, and it's quite impressive. And this unwritten law, this competition in between the entities to try to better themselves comparing to their peers in the same field, has really pushed the bar higher. And I see entities holding themselves accountable and looking at how can I better myself without the enforcement of the law. And I think this is where I personally believe this is where the UAE stands apart from the rest of the countries in the region.
Yeah, and you said something quite interesting, because I think some years ago, or at least maybe when you started, it sort of felt like one thing was the environment. That was something that sort of the government, the politicians had to deal with, and another thing was business. And nowadays, you can see that there's a growing trend. Like companies are more aware, and there's even a demand coming from investors, from clients, for companies to take a side on this issue and take actions about it. It's like at the end of the day, they're actors of our society, and they cannot turn their side to this issue. It's a common problem. It's a common challenge for all of us. So in that sense, how do you see that companies are implementing their efforts to become more compliant with these ESG factors and metrics, maybe to show what they're doing in those aspects?
So again, I will try to explain this from a different perspective. In the West, it's a different, you have the political parties, you have the consumer pressure, you have a lot of things that, dictates the success or failure of this party against the other, and the buy-in from the society at large. Whereas here in the UAE, we have it right from the top, from the leadership. And it is the adoption and buy-in from the top of the leadership is where it has helped to make that difference. And we have it from the founder of the nation, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan, who had taken environmental issues at heart, and he has really done a lot. And he was even recognized on international level by, the Golden Panda and others. So having invested heavily in putting the foundation of the country built on sustainability, that is then where the current leadership took it. And you have the rulers from different emirates, you have them at the forefront in everything, in all discussions. Sustainability is part and parcel of that. And do not forget that this is really part of the religion as well as the culture of this region. There are so many verses in the Holy Quran that touches directly on the issues of sustainability. So when we are doing it part of our religious requirement and part of our culture and part of our identity, really, and the thing that has to be done. So whether we are talking about water conservation, whether we are talking about equal opportunities to all fellow human beings, treating them equally, that's why you find the diversity in this country that has so harmoniously, 204 nationalities and more living together, yet able to coexist in a peaceful, in a harmonious way, and law-abiding people, understanding, having the trust. The important thing is when you have trust in the leadership, and this is where we have here, and I think that is one of the unique things, the full trust of the of the leadership and of the strategy that they put on the way forward gets the others wanting to do right by the environment, by the society, by the economy. I think after COVID-19, after COP26, you saw the UAE government was amongst the first countries in the world to say that, to declare very boldly that by 2050 we will be carbon neutral. And you should see now the buzz that is there in the country, the positiveness, the keenness of everybody to want to know more about this and how can they go about it, what can they do in their own organizations, the government sector, different local government entities, federal government entities. So, you know, there's a beautiful buzz going on. It's just like a busy beehive, you know. Everyone wants to really be part of this exciting new era that we are all entering, so that, you know, we do support the government and we are all hand in hand to achieve this vision by 2050.
Yeah, and as you mentioned before, of course, the UAE is a very diverse country. We have here people coming from different backgrounds, different countries, cultures. How does that affect, I wanted to ask, how does that affect, say, the engagement to make people more engaged with the ESG commitments, ESG factors?
I would like to talk about Emirates Environmental Group in this area. You know, from the beginning, we say together for a better environment from 1991. So that message is telling everyone that we do not care where you are coming from, what is the color of your skin, what is your background, what is your gender. We want to all work together to ensure that our environment is better, that our future is bright, and that we have a sustainable development. And we work, actually, all our programs, everything that we have rolled out is to that angle, and the buy-in and the actual participation, active participation of the different sectors of the society. You know, we have a big Indian community, Filipino community, you know, British community, and the list goes on, you know, the subcontinent, the African and Americas, and all of Europe. Any small island in the world, you will find them here, and that's very impressive. So how do we get them all on board and to do the right thing? There are so many platforms, you know, and there are so many efforts going on, whether you have the right laws being implemented, whether the private sector is seeing that the government institutions are doing it themselves before they are preaching it to them. We have the right laws, the education institutions wanting to build their reputation, to build their credibility, to be seen that this is really the educational hub of the region, and it is building up. The more we are taking sustainability issues and implementing on them, the more it is rewarding us in different ways, and the manifestation is seeing in very obviously. So at Emirates Environmental Group, we interact with all through the education institution, and that is our backbone. We work with them throughout the year in so many different ways and in so many strong environmental issues. And we have a lot of action programs on the ground tackling different sectors of the society. And then you have even within the industries, we work with different, whether we have a program for the hospitality sector, we have for the packaging industry. By the way, Emirates Environmental Group is a full-fledged official member of the World Packaging Organization. So you are looking at different, when we are looking at conservation, we are not looking at one angle of it. We are looking at the whole spectrum. When we look at the issue of food, we are looking at food production, we are looking at food consumption, culture, tradition, and everything. The amount of food being consumed, produced, then you are talking about food waste, and that is a big issue for us as well. Then, of course, we are talking about food security, and we are looking at the carbon footprint of the food. So you can see the diverse aspect of this one particular issue, and that goes on for all the issues that we tackle. And of course, the issue of climate change is something that everybody is beginning to understand its impact. And the threat that it is posing for the survival of human beings, that in itself is a good deterrent for people and entities to behave and to do their operations in a more transparent manner, in a more responsible manner, taking water conservation into perspective, taking energy conservation into thing, and releasing, you know, benefiting from it, whether you are talking about the environmental benefits or you are talking about economic benefits.
And about that larger commitment, sorry, I wanted to ask, from a company perspective, what do you think are the main challenges that companies face at the time of adopting ESG frameworks or reporting, making their efforts more transparent to consumers, clients, investors?
Okay, so it depends really on case by case, on individual cases. I have witnessed beautiful entities, many organizations.
Which ones would you say are like the main ones, like the ones that you see more often?
The multinational, the national entities that have made it globally. These are entities that have nicely understood the impact of playing it correctly in opening markets for them globally, in building their reputation, in enhancing their brand image, and so on and so forth, and in getting the right type of investment. So this financing required for expanding their operations, that has become for me very, very clear. So they have invested themselves in the ESG issues, especially when it comes to the implementation, you know, and understanding. So there are some entities yet to understand the different aspect of the ESG, particularly the governance part of it. And because the requirement is different on the national level, is different on the global level. So you will find different understanding and different levels of implementation of that. I think COVID-19 pandemic exposed those weaknesses, and it was a blow to those who had weak foundations, you know, around here in the country or globally. And they have understood that. 2 days ago, I was attending a beautiful leader summit with one of the our members. You know, it's a group of companies, you know, in the transportation of liquid oil and gas, started here in the UAE. Today, it's a global company having operations in more than 29 countries around the globe, and huge fleet of vessels and all that. So they have to play it correctly by the global requirements. And during the pandemic, because they played their game properly, because their house was in order, they did not need to let go of any of their staff. They did not have to implement any cut in salaries or anything. Actually, they thrived. The data was showing that they were sharing with me in 2021, they registered growth. Where other organizations were struggling to survive. So it depends on how wise the organization is, how they have looked at this issue, understanding that it is an integral part of their growth and of their development, and putting it in their core strategy and having proper strategies in place, KPIs, measurement tools, and so on and so, and building the capacity of their human capital. I think that is one of the most important elements.
Maybe that's one of the challenges you mentioned about you brought up the thing of cost. Like, what can we do to make companies, make executives see beyond the short-term cost, like, and have a longer-term approach to, at the end of the day, like, climate change is not going to happen today, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but maybe in 20 years we already be suffering the consequences, or even in less time than that.
And this is again another issue where I am seeing on the ground here in the UAE, a lot of companies now are looking very, very closely to their operations internally, and I see they're looking at how can they become more cost effective, how can they become more efficient, how can they get more with less, how can they reduce their carbon footprint, understanding the impact that it has on the overall brand and reputation of the organization. So many of the big factories in the UAE now are installing solar panels on in their warehouses, in their rooftops, in their headquarters, in their operations, in their factories, which has helped them reduce their CO2 emission to a grand level, as well as save them a lot of money and increase their productions and putting them on a healthy trajectory. And I think this is important. And since when you have the big players doing that, it means that the others will follow. So usually I get what is the buy-in. You have to have the business case for it. You know, you have to understand it will be very difficult to get a company to only think about environment without thinking about the economic side of it. It has to balance itself. So that is where we work with organizations to ensure that their business is not impacted, but at the same time, actually, they are recording growth, but in a more environmentally friendly manner and in a more humanitarian way with regards to their internal stakeholders as well as external stakeholders. So one of the things that we focus about is finding the right job opportunities for the youth of the country. We have thousands and thousands of graduates on an annual basis. Today, UAE is proud of the many educational institutions that it has.
That was actually what I wanted to ask you now, basically, because I've seen Emirates Environmental Group, you do a lot of projects in collaboration with many schools across the country, right? And I wanted to ask you, have you seen from your experience any sort of change in the mentality of, or the view on environmental aspects in the youngest generations?
The youth are beautiful. I've always enjoyed myself being inspired by the youth, working closely with them. You just get so much positive energy. You are energized the whole, and it takes you through your difficult days and the challenges that you face with the adult world. So I believe our programs are really beautiful programs, unique programs that have enjoyed the active participation of the youth through our student platforms. We have a very strong student membership, and you see the keenness of the families to ensure that their children are part and parcel of Emirates Environmental Group. And because, as I told you, this is a transient society, you have a lot of people settling here, but then, when they need to go to university, some of them send them back to their home country, some of them send them to North America or to Europe for higher education. So when they come to bid me goodbye, it makes me so happy to say that the student has been with me for 7 years, 10 years, and to see how we have been able to mold them into wonderful, accomplished, strong, very well educated youth who understand the issues, who understand their role in the society, who understand their impact on the future, and they're actually taking environmental education as part of their career path. Nothing makes me happier than to see that.
Yeah, definitely. I think we can all agree that we can see some sort of, and the youngest generations they are more committed, they're more aware of the need of taking action when it comes to the climate and environment. They say we have no planet B, that's as the old say goes. For my last question, I'd like to talk about the upcoming COP27 and COP28, which will both be held in the Middle East. This year is going to be held in Egypt, and next year is going to be held here in the UAE. What do you expect from these upcoming climate summits?
I hope there will be more action and less talk. Somehow, you see all these global platforms with so much resources put in there, and big talk and media coverage and all that. But then when it comes to actual outcomes, it's always disappointing that not much is being taken. And again, the political will does not project itself in the way it should. So I hope, inshallah, the ones that we have in the region, particularly COP28, will be one that will set a trend that will be different, that will actually have tangible outcomes, proper targets, and means of implementing those, so that we can build on the Sustainable Development Goals, we can build on the Paris Agreement, we can build on all these beautiful platforms that are out there that were put for us as human beings, regardless of where we are coming from, regardless of our status, but actually for us to implement it at different scales and at different levels. So I hope to see concrete plans, strategies being put on the table, but not only being put on the table, to be accepted and adopted, and with proper enabling mechanism in place, whether on the national level or regional level, or global level, so that we can identify those urgent priorities and we can work together across borders, across sectors to remove those barriers and deliver on what we promise our future generations.
Definitely. I mean, I just read before, like we should stop saying less, we must, and just start taking action. Yeah, I totally agree. Just
that's what we
gap.
do at NRES Environmental Group. Yeah. I promise you, we are very much on practical implementation.
And for these upcoming COPs, are you planning to participate in any way?
Inshallah, you know, we've started working on it, of course, in the different panel discussions that we are conducting. We have one coming up on the 16th of this month, and we are talking about the actual issue of climate change. What is the reality out there? And in every platform that we deliver and we organize, we ensure that we are putting the steps, the solutions, because that is what the participants want to hear, whether it's on an individual level, on an institutional level, on a private sector level. They really join, and these are popular platforms, really, and there's a lot of actual beautiful participation, but they all want to go out with something in their hand, tangible, that they can implement it in their own organization. So I hope, inshallah, we will continue to do that and look forward to playing an active role in COP28.
We hope so, inshallah. And Habiba Al-Marashi, thank you so much for being today here with us in this week's 2-minute warning feature interview. Definitely, ESG is at the end of the day another tool from this toolkit we have to come up with in order to involve different actors of society, from companies to individuals, governments. At the end of the day, this is a marathon that we're all inside this fight against climate change, and effort should come from all the parts. Thank you for being with us today in this feature interview. Follow Gulf Intelligence on Twitter and LinkedIn for more related content on energy transition topics. And we'll see you next week in the upcoming 2-minute warning interview.